Quick disclaimer before anything.
We are going to be a bit critical of this book.
We are never trying to be hateful. We have a lot of respect for authors and what they do, and we want to make that exceedingly clear.
The work that an author does is super difficult. It is so hard to get published, especially in the modern time, and we respect all of the work and effort it takes to put your personal work and thoughts out into the world, and to find people who will help you do that in the publishing world. So despite the fact that we are critical, we really respect what Caitlin Starling has done and hope for lots of success.
And if you disagree with any of the points we're making, then that's fine. That's perfect, actually. Please do. But that's that. Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two and figuring out just what is going on is a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This episode, we are reading The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling, up to but not including chapter 24. And I feel like we should just get right into this one because right from the start of this book, I feel like they really laid down one foundation of like how this book was going to go and then pretty quickly just threw it all in the trash. So I'm ready to just get into it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, we can go more in depth, but I feel like there's definitely parts of this book, and I went back and read the blurb, but there are some aspects to this that felt like they were included for the blurb, to make it seem more interesting and enticing. But yeah, a lot of stuff is just kind of brought up, thrown in the garbage, doesn't matter. But, you know. I
kind of forgot what was in the blurb, too. Like, I remember there was one note I wrote in chapter 1, and I was like, wait, did the blurb say he was a vampire? Or, like, was it that what we're dealing with here?
Yeah, the blurb is basically, like, they're gonna get married because of the business proposal, but she's not allowed to stay at his family home. But then she ends up there one night, and something happens. Whatever.
I think I do remember that part and thinking it was going to be, like, a real strong, like, off-on switch with something happening, like some major curse type thing, but it was more subtle than that. It's like not everything fell apart the moment she stayed over.
Yeah, I was surprised she stayed so early, because I thought that was going to be like the climax moment almost, was her staying and then something happening, but she stayed and like nothing happened anyway. But we can get there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe start with just like the setting of this book. We chose a historical fiction quote. I have some qualms with that label, but right from the start, they give you the name of the place that they are as Great Broughton, I believe. I actually didn't double check that I spelled that correctly in the doc, but
it seems right.
Yeah, Great Broughton, which is obviously just Great Britain. Like, why did we bother? There's like an antagonistic nation of people called the Ruskins or Ruskins, which is obviously the Russians. And so again, I don't know why we changed anything. And this book isn't that old, right? Like, this isn't like some Cold War book where it's always that the Russians are bad, right?
No, well, do you mean the actual book itself?
Yes, like the book itself, yeah. Like, sometimes I just find myself when we're still, and I understand that like Russia has, to get political for a moment, put itself in a villain position again. But like, I often feel like Americans, and this is not an American book, but Americans will often do this thing of just like Russians are the bad guys and everything, right? Like if you look at Marvel movies as a big example. So I just thought, I was just like a little jarred that this book also seemed to have that going on, just refusing to name them Russians.
Yeah, the book is 2021, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah.
Yes, very recent. And yeah, for sure, I agree. Like, they are a very easy nation, allegedly. These are allegedly Russians, I should point out.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. Yes.
But yeah, in a lot of medias, they're like an easy kind of bad guy.
So, I mean, I will say, like, the Ruskin characters in this book aren't like inherently villainous, but like they are talked about as a group as being kind of villainous because that's just who they were at war with. So I guess it's not as like bad as some other takes, but it's not masking anything, I feel like. So
you're right. This is not historical fiction. It is just fantasy.
Yeah, it's totally fantasy. Yeah.
You're creating a distinct universe, even though it is basically identical, except for this war bit, to ours.
And the places, yeah.
Yeah. And you're, timeline-wise, setting it in what is basically Victorian England, because you have, like, Jane mentions medical humors, which went out of fashion about maybe 18th century, and the inclusion of germ theory becoming a thing, which is more 19th century. So that's about where we are in the timeline.
That makes sense. Yeah. The thing that stuck out to me was like the kind of like I'm a woman and I need to be married type narrative, where she was like, I can't just like continue on to not be married. But like this is a part that bothered me. And I feel like that's kind of part of what is being used to justify the historical fiction tag. But it just seemed like I would feel more comfortable with that if it felt like that was a more useful part of the story. But actually, I think this whole story could have existed without like setting it in a world where women are more disenfranchised than they are in the modern time, because it's not like that's over. But like in this situation where like women have to marry and like, I don't know, like kind of this handing over process and even the formality of marriage, like all of that stuff. I mean, didn't have to be the context of this story for it to exist the way it did. I mean, we could have even said like, this is a fantasy world, right? So she still could have set the story back in time in this parallel world and removed some of the like extra contextual sexism in the world. Like you can write that story, I suppose. I shouldn't say she shouldn't do that, but it didn't feel like it added anything to the scenario she set up for the two characters. So
it also doesn't make any fucking sense, because you have doctor characters in this that are women.
Right. That's a great point.
They are already allowed to do whatever they want. And I will say part of what Jane explains is she doesn't want to go with the Cunninghams back to Camhurst. I think mostly because she doesn't want to have to do the society thing. Also because she has trauma.
Right. I mean, that's the only thing that trauma is useful for, is the story point. So,
and she, I guess, can't stay here on her own, even though I think she brings up she has enough money where she could live in town and it would be fine, but I guess she's not allowed to live on her own.
I assume it's just a social thing.
I would assume that as well, but I'm like, then that brings in the sexism and stuff. Like, she's a woman and she can't live by herself, or she can't just stay in the Cunningham's house, I guess, by herself.
Right. But she could be a doctor.
But she could be, yeah, she could be a doctor.
Well, and she's an accountant now. Like, she's not nothing. I guess she's not formally educated, but
she could get work.
Yeah. And it seems like she's known in the village too, so.
For sure. I think people think she's strange, though. It's something she brings up at some point.
Well, that's kind of true.
That is kind of true. And she's not good at making friends and all of that nonsense. Nonsense sounds so harsh, but it is nonsense.
It is, yeah.
So it's a weird mix of like this fantasy universe that has some allowances, but not enough for Jane to be able to do what she wants, because you'll hear this a lot, I think, during this episode. She has to be involved in this story going on. It's just gotta happen. Things gotta happen a certain way to get her where she needs to be. She does not make choice.
Yeah, well, that kind of lightly touches on a thing I've been feeling throughout the book, which is just that, like, the main character of this book is not her. It's Dr. Lawrence.
Yes, I'd agree.
We're just, getting it from her perspective. And so, like, as many, like, little story tools, plot devices as necessary to get Lawrence's story is, like, what we're going to get throughout the book, so.
But anyway, fucked up setting aside, we do indeed need the proposal, I guess, to happen. Jane, brilliant as she is, has created a list of men she could possibly marry for a business marriage, basically. Very
calculated.
I'm fine with that. I love a business marriage.
I was still down in this part of the book, for sure. I was like, okay, I like it. She's like got an independent vibe about her, and she's like, well, if I have to be married, like, we're gonna make this work for me,
Right. And it's assumed she's like done enough research, and I will say before we get into the icky stuff, this Jane talking to Lawrence and like even their conversation before they fully decide to get married is fun. I had fun for a moment. Like, they had good banter. I was like, oh, this is okay. I did not want them to be romantically involved.
I didn't think they would be. Honestly, I don't know why I convinced myself that.
We were fools.
Yes.
But she basically talks to him very straightforward and direct, and it's such a refreshing beginning to this book. And she is like, I'll be your accountant. Love that. We can live separately. That's whatever. Right. We will not be intimate, except I guess one time.
Right. Yes. Because the law,
Because the law. We can't lie, we have to.
Yeah, that doesn't even come up as an option once throughout this. It's like,
You would
well,
think.
we'll spend the night in the same home and we'll just tell everyone it happened, you know?
Right. Literally, who's asking also? Like, who asked?
That's one of those things that was just like an irksome plot point. I don't like those like sort of forced. I mean, that's not a unique quality, but I just don't like these sort of forced points of like, well, we had to consummate. Like, it just sounds so like I don't know what word to use, but it's gross.
It's the ick. You're feeling the ick.
It's definitely that. Because she sets it up, right? She's very clear about, like the accountant. She's like, here's the list of things. We agree. He's like, yeah, like if this is even going to happen, like that is the minimum. Also, you can't stay with me, right? Like there's so many things that just all get thrown out the door. And like, don't understand why like it's been so much time setting up this kind of agreement. Because I would say even like the agreement falling apart isn't a huge plot point. They mention it a couple of times, but it's not really like weighty.
Right, because it's not like they ride any tension in this book.
Well, so they don't know each other.
I
wouldn't believe
oh my
tension.
God. Holy shit. They do not know each other. That is such a big point. But like, I can understand, not personally, but the concept of lust, I suppose, which is what they're feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though it seems so foreign to Jane, she still gets caught up in it. So like, if they had good banter, which they had, and then it kind of mingled in with the physical stuff they wanted to do, whatever, and they wrote that for longer, I could be like, okay, this is fine.
Yeah.
It's a little cliche, typical, whatever, but no, instead we get like 30 pages in and they're like making out, talking about consummating their marriage, and I'm like,
yes.
So why is it a thing? Why did we discuss it at all?
Yeah, and because they do just get in the feels, right? Like both of them do it. I mean, we see more of Jane's side of it, but they're in the feels. They're like, like I want to be with this person all the time. I was like, oh, this is not the story I signed up for when I read the first, X number of pages. I mean, I truly thought that what my theory was from the very beginning, like just from the first, like talking about the idea of this business setup, was that this book was going to be, the historical part was going to matter because they were going to be in a homophobic society, and Dr. Lawrence was gay, and Jane was like ace, and this was just an agreement they made so that way people would stop asking them questions. Like that's the direction I thought it was going to go in.
I thought the same thing. I thought we were getting an arrow ace Jane, because the thing is, I hate the cliche of like the woman who doesn't understand intimacy, like doesn't think it's something she's built for, right? Like she doesn't know how to do it.
God, I know where you're going. Yeah.
It's like, okay, as somebody who has trouble with intimacy and is also just ace in general, so like from a friend perspective and from like a romantic, I guess, sexual perspective, like I get you, right? I get you, girl. You're just like me for real. But that is discarded so quickly, like during the surgery when like her heart skips a beat or whatever, and she's like, oh, I've never felt like this before. And it falls so quickly into that cliche of, it's not actually that you aren't built for intimacy, it's that you didn't find the one for you. Right? And she just needed to find the one.
Yeah, it's like the ace version of, oh, well, like you should just like have sex with a woman and then you'll change your mind. Talking from the perspective of a gay man. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, like how do you know, right? How do you know? You've never experienced it. And it's like, I don't need to.
Wow, this is the fastest I've ever been queerbaited. It's like, it's over so quickly.
For sure. It's just so ridiculous. And it's ridiculous even from a cliche perspective because it is disregarded so quickly. Not only does she decide to jump his bones almost immediately, she trusts his character to like an unbelievable, illogical degree.
Yeah. I mean, she constantly talks after like information starts coming out about feeling betrayed. I'm like, but
exactly.
You don't actually know anything to feel betrayed about. Like the whole agreement was based on the fact that you don't know each other, like, and that part wasn't supposed to matter. So like him not coming forward with this information, I mean, first of all, you weren't supposed to find out any of it because you weren't supposed to be in his house. But like, second of all, him not coming forward is not really as dishonest as you're putting it out to be. And it is dishonest. He's not sharing information that you're asking for, but he didn't agree to give you any information to begin with. He didn't think you were going to get to that point, so.
Exactly. And she continues to like trust his character. Like, he could be such a great man. Like, I don't think he's a murderer. And it's like,
Right.
girl, you met him a week ago. Like, what are
Yes,
you
don't
talking
know.
about?
You don't know. And like the whole like this kind of happens closer to the end, but like where she's kind of like, I'm gonna change him into the person I thought he was gonna be.
I can fix him. I can fix
Yeah,
him.
I can change him. I can fix it. It's like, huh? Like you don't. What? There's nothing there. There's nothing to base that on.
Also, why would you want to?
Yeah,
You're married
that
to a
too.
doctor in a small town. You can live on your own. Do what you want. Why the fuck would you want to fix him?
Yeah.
Like, girl, get a boyfriend. Like, stop talking to him.
Doesn't
Like,
matter. Yes.
you could be married and never say a word to him.
Absolutely. That's how it should have been.
Right.
Quite
And
frankly.
she battles with this throughout the whole book of, like, obviously being in love with him for some reason, and then also not wanting to be at his house or fix his problem and being, like, scared of him. And I'm like, which is it? Like, do you want to help him or do you not want to help him? Like, make up your mind. Like, she is presented as this kind of strong-willed, smart, organized character. And I have some thoughts about the difference between being mathematically smart and, like, having deduction abilities, because they are different.
Yeah.
And I think Jane just kind of is considered smart in whichever way suits her in the moment. But then she does dumb shit like this, and she doesn't make up her mind. And it's like, girl, do you want answers or do you not want answers? Like, leave or stay. What are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, so even stepping back from like the comments we were making about like seeming like she might be an ace or a romantic character, as far as you mentioned that she's like supposed to be a strong-willed character, but that kind of falls away pretty hard too, right? Like I think in one of the notes I wrote, she's like frothing at the mouth for him. Like she's like so like under his thumb, but like he's not even controlling his own thumb. So it's like she has like moved his thumb on top of her. Like she's like so much like submitting herself to what she thinks is best for him without talking to him, knowing him, and forgetting like all of the parts of herself that she came in with. I mean, at one point she's doing dishes in the house and I'm like, I thought your whole thing was you didn't want to be like a wife, like a classic wife. And here you are doing dishes in his house, like begging to stay with him in his home that you weren't supposed to live in at all. Like she just like dropped everything and became stereotype.
Right. There's so many lines where they're together and she's like, I wish he would hold me. I wish he would take my hand.
Yes.
I feel so lost without him. I'm like, girl, get up. You kissed him once, had sex with him once, like in a haunted
he like poked
house.
You on your wedding day with his left hand, pointer finger.
Oh my god, absolutely wild. Proposed with bone rings. Like, that's the man?
Yes. Oh my god. I was kind of down for that scene. I don't know. I kind of like the bone ring proposal.
It's a good aesthetic. I also appreciate it. A little weird that it came from an actual person he knew. We can talk about the curiosities and like doctor stuff, but human stuff, always questionable. We do get information that like the guy wanted the rings to be used, so that made it better.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's one of many times in this story where I feel like a weird things happen, and then there's a weird thing happens, and then they're like, but it's okay because of this reason.
They definitely have to justify some stuff.
Yes.
We're in a very messy time period in regards to doctors. You kind of have to ride that line of like, are doctors evil or do we like them? Because it was kind of going back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Wow, we just hopped left and right.
This episode's going to be crazy. I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be a mess.
Yeah, because we've definitely dodged around going chronological this time. Should we hop back to like with Jane helping with the surgery? So this is still kind of like pre-marriage though.
Pre-marriage.
So the surgery happens on the dude because he like cut himself open, right? Like he was like mid something, some spell, something like that. We find later when we see the salt and chalk thing show up again. And yeah, he like cuts himself open. And it does feel oddly like Lawrence ends up operating on a lot of people who play with magic. Like this is a common thing.
Also, the idea that like salt and chalk is like all you need. It's so funny to me.
What I'm confused to what their two separate purposes are. Maybe they just explained this when they did the thing in the library, but I'm like, what does the salt do and what does the chalk do?
I mean, I think the salt is some of this is supernatural knowledge, so forgive me.
Yeah.
But like a purifying kind of expulsive type of thing, like you keep the ghosts, you keep the bad away type of thing. And then the chalk for like drawing the diagrams. stuff like that.
Oh, okay. That makes. I was like, if you're just drawing two circles, I'm not sure I understand, but the diagrams make more sense.
But it's very typical kind of. You draw a little pentagram and you pour some salt.
Right.
And apparently that's all you need to work magic.
Yep. Well, I mean, depending on how you define work magic in this book, they barely believe that they're able to do magic. So.
And it's also always going to go wrong. Fuck you, witches.
Goodness. Yeah. The surgery thing also was just like morbid, right? Like this book, it's like, I guess it just leans into the fact that it's about doctors, and it's like, cool, like here's a gross like surgery that barely engages in sterilization, and here's like bowels being extracted and body parts in jars, and it was a lot. It's not my preference. I mean, I don't even like watching like gory movies or video games or anything like that. So
it was very graphic. I was slightly surprised.
Yeah. I thought there was going to be a lot more of it because it started so early.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we still might get more of it, but even like the Elodie scene explanation wasn't as graphic as the surgery bit.
Yeah, I guess so. When they talk about the pulsing heart, that part bothered me.
When Lawrence explains it a little bit more, that he was trying to pump her heart, that part, I guess, is kind of graphic.
Actually made me wince, yeah. Because I just like envisioned him like literally holding and squeezing her heart, and I was just like, I can't, I can't do this. It's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Jane grows up with the Cunninghams, who are kind of, I guess, like godparents. Like her parents asked them to take care of her shortly before their deaths. I don't really know what their vibe is, honestly, like what the vibe of the house is, but it seems like things are positive. But anyway, so Jane, talks to them about the marriage situation, and they kind of like give her some support. So she has her wedding day, and as they process, I guess, out of the city, even though they were supposed to go to the surgery center, a parade forms behind them. And apparently that's because the Cunninghams set that up and like invited her school friends and things. I don't know. Weird vibes. They had to like apologize via letter for that.
Yeah, the Cunninghams, in my head, they seemed like great guardians.
Mm-hmm.
Jane just came to them with a batshit crazy plan. And Mr. Cunningham was like, okay, I'll help you.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, yeah.
And Mrs. Cunningham is like, it was so nice to see who is basically our youngest get married. Like, we were so happy. But then we get to the end of this section, and they just fucking dipped without saying anything.
Unannounced. It does feel like something's maybe a little sus there. I don't know what would be working behind the scenes to make that happen, but it does seem odd. Well, I guess she does get a letter. She just hasn't come back to see it.
Right. But even she's like, their house is completely empty. They've moved out. And yeah, she does have a letter she didn't get to see yet. But even then, even the spot on her bedroom ceiling had been painted over. I'm like, damn, all of that in a couple days? They really wanted to leave.
Right, well, that's what she says too. She's like, oh man, I didn't realize they were so antsy to get rid of me. Like, damn, they're gone so fast.
It like doesn't make sense, but also it makes sense when you realize they have to be gone in order for Jane to be stuck with Lawrence.
Oh, God. It's just another thing that's happening to force the plot along.
Yes.
Not because it makes sense.
I mean, I guess we might get more information in the letter. Like, maybe they had to leave quickly for some reason. Or maybe they'll say, we hated your guts. But even that would be forced, so.
That'd be weird. They do seem a little wild, right? Like, Mrs. Cunningham's whole thing about, like, it doesn't really matter if you knew your husband when you got married or not, which is just another one of those justification things. That whole letter was crazy.
It was crazy. I mean, supportive, I guess, for the time. The quote-unquote time period.
Yes.
That kind of exists. But that's like copium times 100.
Yeah.
But yeah, they end up going by accident to the Lawrence's family's home, and it's falling the fuck apart. Even the parade goers are like, "Oh, this is awkward," and they kind of leave because it looks like shit apparently.
Yeah.
And the plan isn't for Jane to stay there that night. They're gonna chill and have dinner, I guess, and then she's gonna go back to town,
which almost happens to her credit. But yeah, they head out from the house, and I mean, I guess it's starting to storm before she even leaves, but it's just so heavy by the time they're on their way that there's a literal mudslide. Knocks out the carriage, and the horse runs off, and I don't know what happens to the driver because Jane just comes home. Also, though, I understand why she comes back, but on the other hand, already at this point, I'm kind of over it with Jane already wanting to stay at the house when she's been told explicitly that she's never supposed to stay there and like agreed to it. So I understand that it's a rough situation, but convenient that she's like, I'll just go back instead of like going wherever the driver goes.
To be fair, the driver runs off to get the horse.
That's fair.
And I think she mentioned she's only like half a mile from the house at this point. So it's closer for her to just turn around. This instance makes sense for her to return. Lawrence is he happy? Is he upset? I don't know.
I would have thought he'd been more upset.
For sure. Well, he does think she's a ghost.
That's also true. But he doesn't like everything he explains later that he feels weak, but like everything he says he backs down from, right? Like it's like he doesn't ever like, I don't know. I mean, he shouldn't have to like reinforce boundaries, like they made an agreement, so it should just be fine, but like he definitely doesn't try to reinforce any of the boundaries he's supposedly setting. Right.
The issue is this instance, sure, kind of an emergency situation. We can handle some ghosts for one night. The nights after that, I mean, I think night 2 it might still be raining. Which is like, okay, fine.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right. But she had a chance to leave, though.
She had a chance to leave. And instead, he leaves.
Yeah.
And then leaves her there for like days. Because I guess he doesn't want to talk to her. And I'm like, do you want her to know about these things or not? You're kind of just leaving her in the haunted house by herself.
Yeah, to me, he had to know. Like, to me, there's no way he left her there without knowing that she's going to figure stuff out. Like, she's pretty intelligent. And like she gets the like sort of his log books, his accounting books. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Those books get sent back to her. So like there's no way she's not going to figure things out. She was already trying to snoop around the house on day 1. So
right. And she's very clearly asking questions. She asks about the cellar door. She asks about who Elodie is. And she even asks about, I think she does ask about like what happens the night she sees all the ghosts and shit, and he just straight up gaslights her.
Dude, so direct. Yeah, like, I mean, yeah, he's also just like such a consistent liar throughout this whole book, which, I don't know, I guess we mentioned earlier, comes as a constant surprise to Jane for no good reason. But yeah, it's like, wow, like she really just, I have nothing new to say here. She's just under his thumb.
Yeah, and it's like, if you want to lie, because you don't want her to know, which is presumably why you're lying, right? Mm-hmm. Then why the fuck are you leaving her in the house?
Yes.
Rent her a hotel room in town if you don't want to see her.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, yeah.
I do not
understand. The whole arrangement is set up for them to be separate, right? Like, just do the thing. Like, do the thing. Send her back, like you said. Don't give her the choice to stay. It's your house. You don't have to. And just do the thing you were supposed to do. She stays at the surgery. You stay at the house. We're all happy. We agreed on this.
But of course, there is some issue in that shit just keeps happening. We have the rain, we have the mudslide, and then we have these bitch-ass doctors that show up.
Oh my god.
So it's like, can she leave?
Yeah, this part was crazy. It was like, it's like this crowd of people arriving at the door of this place that like, it seems like no other soul has stepped in for the past 30 years, like let alone like a crew of people. I don't know why these folks felt close and comfortable enough with Lawrence to just pop on up and be like, we're staying the night.
They were at least like school friends, so they are like very close. But even Lawrence was like, I told you not to come here.
Right.
But he's having his boundaries broken left and right.
Left
for real.
Right.
Like,
yes.
He cannot win.
Actually, it's a good point. That's a good point. That's like the one time where he's really like, hey, I had a boundary and you guys broke it, you know?
And they're like, oh, come on, man. Let's drink and do some spells.
Actually kind of depressing to watch when they're like, oh, you know, classic Lawrence. And I'm like, this man is trying to bare his soul. And you're just like brushing it away.
For sure. And especially because at the end, when they leave like the next day, they're like, he's not the same. Fuck Lawrence.
They're so
and I'm like,
bitter.
What?
Yes, they're so bitter. I'm like, you guys showed up unannounced to a house that wasn't prepared for you and left like angry about it. Also, like they were like kind of angry at Jane, but I'm like, I don't know, like you guys entertained her and like brought her down to your ritual. So like, why are you mad at her for like screaming or fainting or whatever? Like that was you. You guys did that.
When Jane like talked to Hunt, one of the women doctors, and was like, I have to stay to clean up your invasion. I was like, yes. It was an invasion, wasn't it?
Invasion.
Actually unhinged behavior.
Oh my god. And yeah, they did. They came in, like, were a ruckus, like, ate all of the food in the house, not to mention, like, all the drinking, and, like, he wasn't even there, right? Like Lawrence left.
He left.
Like they were just crashing his house.
Ridiculous. He was like, sorry, Jane, I gotta go.
Yeah. Again. Well, I don't know. Should we get more into that whole situation? The ghostliness. Well, I guess there's ghostliness we haven't addressed yet because I forget whose husband, one of the house servants. I don't really remember who's who on that. But one of their husbands was like, I saw like a girl with red eyes in the window of the house, you know? And then like 2 seconds later, Jane is like, oh my God, I see her in the mirror. It's me. This part was giving, did you read Turn of the Screw?
Oh, you bet your ass I did. I don't remember it though.
It's giving me Turn of the Screw. The part that it's making me think of, so in that book, the main character, the governess, is like pretty, I guess, impressionable. And so she does start to believe in ghosts throughout the book. And it's at least suggested that there are no ghosts in that book at all. And she's just kind of like coming up with like believing herself too hard and maybe even trying to cause a scene like for attention purposes. Like there's a lot of suggestions on it. Anyway, that's what this was giving here, where it's like she hears about it and then immediately sees something where it's like, oh, like you don't know this or believe this. You're just like being impressionable, and like maybe that's like trying to lean into the whole like Jane is seeming a bit more sensitive and maybe emotional in this part of the book. So for some reason that means she's also impressionable. This is a part of the historical fiction I'm not liking. So that's what that was feeling like to me.
Yeah, for me, similar vein. Like I thought, first of all, having a character overhear other characters or just be given like told information outright, boring as hell.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right, because it just switches from being a romance to an occult, like in a conversation that she overhears.
Right. And also the fact that Jane then goes on to see the ghost in differing degrees of like fear levels. The first time in the mirror, it's not that bad. The next time, a little more spooky. But like you could have had the mirror scene and then kind of building that tension of like, was this real? Was this not real? And then having her see Elodie that night and the other shadows.
Yeah.
And then immediately having Lawrence gaslight her the next day. You really could have like ridden the tension of this being a haunted house. Like, is it haunted? Is it not haunted?
True, yeah. It's like confirmed so quickly.
And like the fact that she hears about it and then she sees it, it's like, that's kind of boring. And then the fact that we get into this ghost shit, like with Elodie, and like she's able to figure out who Elodie is so quickly, both because of the books that she's coincidentally given, basically, and then because this group of doctors just shows up randomly. Like, she's just given all of this information so quickly. She doesn't have to sleuth. She doesn't have to figure anything out.
There's no mystery. Yeah.
There's no mystery. And then Nizamiev obviously comes in and is like, you have to believe me. I am going to tell you this only if you believe I'm telling you the truth. And Jane's like, okay. So we don't even get any of that tension of if Jane believes it or not, which doesn't make sense for her character.
Feel like during the magic conversation, it was like a little bit of Nizamiev saying something, like saying, okay, like, or actually, let me take a step back. In that conversation with Nizamiev, Jane is like, tell me all the magic things. And then Nizamiev is like, cool, here's a magic thing. And Jane is like, I don't believe you. Like, it's like, why'd you ask? Yeah,
because I think there's 2 conversations that happen. One, I think, is before the ritual, and then one's after.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
And I think the after one, Nizamiev is like, I'm not going to waste my time.
Mm-hmm.
You will believe it. But that completely, like, it just rushes character development in such an uninteresting way, because this is a character built on logic, supposedly, and math, supposedly. So, like, she's especially a character that should not believe in magic and should not believe in ghosts, but now she's forced to believe it 100%. So we're skipping any of that tension as to whether this could be real or not. Especially when you bring in the concept of magic not working, according to some of these doctors. So it's like, is it real? Is it not real? It's like, we're not going to discuss that. It's real, 100%. We don't care about that shit. It's uninteresting. And I'm like, that's the most interesting part, right? Is the building of that tension in a haunted story. Like, we're not getting any of it.
That's why I think this contributes to the 2 feelings I'm having about this book, which is, I don't know what could possibly happen of interest in the second half of the book. And I feel like nothing has really happened in the first half of the book, even though we've talked about several things that have happened. But it doesn't feel like a lot has happened because it has been a lot of just like telling. There hasn't been a lot of engagement.
Yes, anything about anything in this book has been told to you. Things about Jane, like her trauma, what she's interested in, how she gets through things, like that's told to you.
Yeah, you just have to take like The trauma is probably the worst one for me, like where you really just have to accept it as fact. Like that's that.
Right. We only really get one instance of that kind of coming up when she's in the cellar and she feels like she's locked in.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, she's like, I remember the war. I'm like, do you?
Couldn't
tell. It doesn't show. None of this, like, shows in her character. And, like, her constantly bringing up math, like, I guess it's fine that she thinks about it if she loves it so much. But other than that, like, none of this is shown in her character.
Yeah. So with this, I'm like, no, the math and magic thing is not lining up for me. And maybe it's the goal is to like be mystical, but it doesn't feel like that either. It just feels empty.
You're also describing magic as madness. And then that kind of ventures into the dangerous area in which people who are mad are only mad because they see the world differently as it should be, like magically, like
to a mystical level, yeah.
That's just a cliche we shouldn't touch, to be honest.
Well, I mean, but that's what it's done, right? Like her whole thing is like working at an asylum so she can study people who would otherwise just be called disabled, but because she believes a subset of them are magical.
Or they have used magic to such a degree that they've ruined themselves.
Yeah.
Which is another thing. Apparently all magic will lead to ruin.
Yes. There's no good magic. Yeah, there's no balance.
Right. You get ghosts like Lawrence got, which apparently he got off easy. And, like, part of that I can understand. Like, you are trying to do things that humans shouldn't do. So, like, sure, I guess you can get some impact from that. But then it's almost like, I guess that is it, isn't it? Like, doctors think they can play God, and so they use magic, even if they believe in it or not.
Oh, God, you had to know I laughed out loud when they were like, we were all in an eating club together, which is just, like, a secret society.
Okay, I
like,
wasn't sure what an eating club was, but I figured they were just in a secret society. You have more experience with that than I do.
So actually at Princeton, they still do call them eating clubs there.
Oh.
I wasn't super sure about if in the UK if they still do that, but I also wasn't sure that secret societies were big in the UK, but when they mentioned it, I was like, I guess eating clubs must be a thing there, and that's maybe where ours come from. I haven't looked that far in the history. I know that like secret societies are what grew into fraternities here. I kind of just thought secret societies were the origin. But anyway, this is getting too much into it. Yes, an eating club is just a secret society, and it's so funny to be like, oh, like all of these super educated people were in a secret society together, like doing spells in the basement of their dorms. Like, it's ridiculous.
I guess that is what it is. Like, secret societies, which are just elitist as hell, so it makes sense it's filled with doctors.
Right, yes, yeah.
They think they can control reality, which is kind of what doctors do anyway.
This part honestly reminded me of the cartographers.
Oh, because of the secret societies being silly?
Yeah, like the secret society of people like trying to manipulate the world. Like, all right.
That's true too, yeah.
It is funny, like having like gone to a school where secret societies are a thing, and like at least for us in the modern time, they're just like groups of people hanging out with each other. I know that's like not what they've always been. And then there's the few, right? There's the Skull and Bones and whatever, but it's just so funny to see like how all of that stuff gets represented in media when it's like truly like we're just 16 people having a drink in a room.
But yeah, I don't know. The magic was weird and villainized, I guess, in a way that makes sense for what the theme of this book might be. I guess don't play God. I
guess. But then there's the whole like Lawrence being like victim thing. Like he's taking all the blame for everything.
Right, because it's Jane also says he's giving himself kind of a god complex because he thinks he's so important that he can take the fault for everything.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense. But, I mean, obviously the end of his arc has to be him forgiving himself. What else do you have?
I guess dying?
I guess dying. But that would only feed into, like, him being a martyr.
Yeah, that's true. Also, this book is called The Death of Jane Lawrence, so...
Yeah, but I'm wondering if it's like tarot death and like it's just going to be she changes somehow.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. And also just because like that has her married last name, I was like maybe just like the idea of her being his wife will finally die.
Oh, that too. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, so before she gets the whole explanation about magic, she does actually take part in a ritual and is also maybe initiated, but not really.
Yeah, that part was unclear.
I think her wearing the veil was the initiation.
I thought the veil was a loophole. Actually, I don't know.
Oh, it might have been.
Yeah, because they were like, it's not an initiation night, so like we're doing this. But yeah, they said some words about it, but it's weird.
It doesn't matter.
That's also where they name who was it? They named one character who they hadn't named yet up until that point.
Oh, I know one of the females.
Yeah.
One of the females. Is
That's how she's
name.
described. Right? Like, yes, I can't even remember now. But I was like, who is this?
I think it's like Reese or something.
Reese, yeah. I was like, man, I didn't know there were more people here. But apparently she's in charge.
Yeah, it is interesting that like it's the female characters that either believe or have some kind of experience. Like Hunt at the end of it, who's also a female doctor, is like really shaken by what happened, which differs a lot from like her male counterparts. So something could be said about that maybe, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've read enough this book for me to say that I don't like the way that women are written in this book.
Yeah, especially because one of the guys comments like, enough with this spiritualist nonsense. And I'm like, bitch, you just did a fucking ritual. Shut up.
You were in it.
Shut
yeah,
up.
it's annoying.
But it really is just because they like to dress up in like their fancy robes and pretend.
Yeah. Oh my god, it's just so silly.
But they do the ritual. And they're expecting nothing to happen because nothing ever happens. Probably because, as Nizamiev explains, they probably don't actually believe magic is real. So it won't work for them, which is crazy, because Jane and Nizamiev obviously know magic is real, but yet she explains that because they are too logical, they will not be able to do it.
It's so silly.
We'll see if that changes, I suppose.
Yeah, Jane has like promised to not do magic, right? But that just doesn't seem like it's gonna stick, because everything she's promised in this book, she's broken.
Yeah, there is a world in which she does, like, she can't break that mental in her head of like, it is illogical, it is unreality, like, I guess that's a thing, but you've also literally been choked by a ghost, so I don't know what you're talking about.
That's a good point. It was hands-on.
For sure. But in the ritual, at least, she does get a vision of Elodie getting cut open by Lawrence, seemingly still awake, alive, yes?
I guess. Yeah, that part was weird too. I was like, I guess she's not dead. It was weird, yeah.
Yeah, it brought into question whether that actually happened, or, as Nizamiev posits, it was just what Elodie felt and like her perception of what happened.
Right. But it did happen, right?
It did.
Yeah, I thought that was so funny that was even included, because it totally was just what happened.
Another instance where I thought we were going to kind of ride this tension of, is my husband a murderer or is he not a murderer? Yeah. And then he's like, I cut her open. And I'm like, holy shit.
I do feel like there's enough of these that happen to like not have trust, even though we already know he's kind of a liar, but like to not have trust as the reader that like everything is going to be explainable, like or that even every explanation that he's giving is true. So I'm not saying that I necessarily question that what he told at the end of this half of the book was false, but like every time we get more information, I'm like a little more hesitant to believe him right off the bat. But also, like, that's not his fault. It's really like Jane's fault for prying. So
right. It could be interesting though if, as you mentioned, we did get this from his perspective, because he is kind of the main character. Like, how much of this is just a lie? How much of it does he believe to be truth, right? Because the talk of perception, like, how much fault does he take? Like, how alive was she? How does he think of that moment?
That's a good point.
That could be interesting to explore. It also goes a bit into, like, turn of the screw, like a narrator you can't trust.
Yeah.
For Jane, it's because she's being gaslit by everybody.
Yeah.
But for Lawrence, it's true. Like, it's been so long. He's under the effects of this curse, basically. Like, can he trust his own judgment of things if he thinks even Jane is a ghost in the beginning?
To give credit to Nizamiev about like whether or not it was true or like what Elodie saw, like I do think that might have just been like a little hint at her to not like lean too much into what her own perception of things was, and like make her question herself a little bit more, whether for the gaslighting or just to like calm her down and be like, listen, just because like you have put some pieces together doesn't mean that you've put the right pieces together. Right.
And there is even an instance of Nizamiev being like, okay, here's the information, here are the puzzle pieces, let's lay them out for you.
Yeah.
So she's like definitely trying to help Jane along. I don't know why.
Yeah. She's very suspicious of her too. Maybe just because she's Ruskin.
That'd be crazy.
I feel like that's the only reason. We have no other reason to not trust her. I like her. I like Nizamiev, honestly.
Yeah, I think the issue is she's seen as this character that, like, lacks empathy, basically.
Right.
Like, she's kind of harsh to Lawrence.
Yeah, the whole, like, don't waste my time thing.
Yeah, works in an asylum, which is questionable.
Mm.
And it seems like she wants to observe more than she wants to help. And this could be another instance of that. But also, that is what, like, Jane is thinking of her. So it's like, is that accurate? Or, I don't know.
That's a good point.
She is another doctor at the end of the day, so she could just be cold. But I think it's also... I don't think there's a world in which she genuinely wants to help Lawrence. I don't know. I don't think she cares that much.
Well, she almost seemed a little competitive at first, right? When she comes by and is like, and what about your research? And he's like, my research isn't happening right now, or whatever he says.
Yeah, I think it's because he's done something, like, that hasn't been done before. And also, I guess, the fact that she can't do magic, but he can.
I feel like, well, whatever. She's too logical, I guess. But I'm like, at that point, you just make yourself do magic. You know it's possible. You see all your friends doing it, you know.
Such weird rules we've established in our own universe.
Well, yeah, so I guess he gets a chance to explain himself, Lawrence, about not killing Elodie, but maybe killing Elodie in his opinion. At that part, also, I'm not sure. But yeah, there's the whole heart pumping thing, and then Jane is like, I guess he's maybe not a murderer, ?
She's like, in my heart, I can't believe him to be a murderer. And I'm like, in your heart, bitch. You met him a week ago.
A week ago. But you know what? It's okay because I'm just gonna change him. Yeah, like I'm just gonna make sure he turns into the Lawrence I thought he was before I knew anything about him.
She's like, I know he can be good. He could be the best. And I'm like, what evidence? He's a doctor? I mean, so was Vin. So was Hunt. And they were assholes. Like, what is our criteria?
And quite frankly, like, you weren't supposed to know him too. So, like, what do you mean you're gonna change him into, like, the person you thought he was? Even if you had just followed your terms, you would have never known if he even was that person, so.
Right. And it's also, like, you can't even say she wants this because she wants to help Elodie, which would be, I think, good motivation, right? Here's a woman who died at 24, like, tragically, and is forced to now haunt this house because her husband did some crazy shit. I'd want to help her too, even though she choked me out, but she's a spirit. I'll let it pass.
She gives like one hint of it at one point where she's like, but Elodie, but like it doesn't really feel like that's what it's about.
Right. Yeah, she's even to Elodie, like, I want to help you. Tell me how to help you. But then 2 seconds later, she like books it out of the house, talks to Lawrence about this stuff, and it's still like a weird jumbled mess of if she actually wants to help or if she never wants to go back, or if it's about Elodie or if it's about Lawrence. It's like, choose something to do and like stick with it.
Yeah, she's also talking about how much she doesn't trust him in this moment, and then she shows up to the surgery center and falls asleep in a chair. I'm like, that's not how I would treat someone I thought might be a murderer.
She doesn't want to see him because she isn't prepared to ask questions. And then she sees him and immediately has perfect questions lined up. Yeah. I'm like, hello?
It's a problem to me that I don't like Jane. And I'm supposed to read the second half of this book.
Honestly, same. I mean, to be fair, she was kind of out of the running as soon as she wasn't like other girls and like didn't understand intimacy.
Oh, that's what it was, wasn't it? She wasn't like other girls. How'd I miss it?
Not only is she not like other girls, she's also a I can fix him girl.
Yeah. What a combo.
The worst combination. And it turns out she is exactly like other girls. Yeah. No offense to the girlies out there. Right. But she is a normal girl. Like, she likes a guy. And she gets a little unhinged about it. That's fine.
That's true. Yeah.
Don't say you aren't built for intimacy and then proceed to be intimate with somebody. I don't know. It's just a dumb plot point. Like, if they had explored it throughout the entirety of the book and this level of trust they wanted to build throughout the entirety of the book, I'd be like, okay, that was fine. But the fact that it's only like 30 pages of this kind of rustling around and then it's whatever, they're a normal married couple, except for the fact that he's haunted by ghosts. Like, why have it? Why have it? She can still want a business marriage.
Right.
She can still want to marry and just do work and not be involved with somebody because she doesn't think she'll find anybody or she doesn't want to go back to Camhurst because of trauma, like that could be the reason.
Mhm.
You don't have to involve the intimacy part. For me, it's a problem. It's a problem.
Right, no, I agree. Well, listeners, I apologize that we have chosen a book for which we feel so negatively before we even get to the end.
We don't try, I will say.
Yeah. What is your prediction on the chances that we like this book more by the next episode? Because there's been a number of books where we start strong and then we're like, ugh, I guess not, you know? What are the chances that this turns around?
Oh, wow. That would be surprising. I think
it'd be difficult just because my true upset started pretty early in the book as far as the turnaround from, like what I mentioned of thinking, oh, maybe this is like a queer story, or like, you know, there's, or we didn't even mention too, like how like it was almost, there was almost maybe a neurodivergent vibe about Jane with the like not being interested in romance and like focused on work is like, and that's like her big motivator. Like I thought that might be the direction the story was going in, and when it wasn't that, I kind of was like, oh, actually I don't think this is the sort of book I would have picked up off the shelf if I knew.
Right. I don't know, because it's like some books have, we've mentioned it, good bones, like they have a good start. The foundation for this house is crumbling.
Yeah, exactly.
It is Lindridge. So I don't know what it could possibly do to get better. Like Jane becoming a stronger character, but she was supposed to be that anyway. So it's not really character development, it's character getting to where she was supposed to be. The romance between them, I'm not interested.
Same.
Elodie, the only thing maybe is if they do something interesting with Elodie, right? Because I think they're very much setting up Elodie kind of being, and magic in general, I suppose, being gothic, being dark, being the villain, right? Like, these are things you should not touch. And Elodie was a victim.
Mm-hmm.
It's like through and through, multiple different ways she was a victim. Was she also maybe a doctor and probably an asshole? Maybe. But nobody deserves to get their chest ripped open and their heart to basically taken out, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yes.
And she's forced to haunt this house because of what Lawrence wanted.
Yeah.
He could not let her go.
And she gets no voice in this book, so.
For sure. So her being painted as the villain and like having to be exorcised from the house to save him, boring as hell. Also cliche as hell, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do something interesting with her and kind of give her a voice, maybe give her some power and make it like seem like she's not bad anymore. I don't know. I don't know how they would do it and get an ending. I guess you could have some kind of you need to let me go, I'll let you go type of situation, and that's how things are kind of cleansed in the house. But would that be unimpactful for some people? Maybe. But I don't know. I guess just making a character out of Elodie instead of just a villain.
I like that idea because I'm like concerned that, yeah, because I don't really think I'm gonna like how the direction of the relationship between Jane and Lawrence is gonna go. So I do think that's the best chance. Well, should we just go into some theories of what we think might actually happen?
The knives that are burned that apparently were used on Elodie.
We didn't even bring up that she cuts herself with that scalpel.
Yeah, basically, a doctor's bag is found in the fire. Jane cleans the scalpels and the knives inside and cuts herself on one of them. And Vin, when he needs a knife, he almost takes it, but then it's like, oh wait, these are used on Elodie. They might still have something from her. It does make Jane think of the fact that she cut herself, and so it could be, I don't think she's going to get sick with, what did she have, yellow fever, I think?
Well, that's at least what they think she had, but yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah, I guess it could be magic-based, especially because we didn't mention the Lawrence family is apparently a long line of magic users, so I'm assuming Elodie's also, her family probably was the same.
Well, she was at least initiated, so.
Yeah. So could Jane be infected with something more magic-based? Possibly. That's, I guess, a theory. Or I'm thinking it might even allow her to experience more visions or like parts of Elodie, which could be a good way to get information instead of just telling it to us.
That's kind of what my theory was just whatever this scalpel did was just kind of give her more access, or like I call it like elevated magic. Like she can do a little bit more than your average person can, just because like she was, I don't know, imbued with something from that scalpel.
If Elodie is lingering because of magic, then the tools used to cut into her and thus kill her, something could linger on them too. In a world that makes sense. It doesn't have to. This is magic, baby.
Right. It certainly feels like the answer to when Lawrence is like, but why is it that like your visions are so much like different than mine? Like they all like have Elodie and I don't really see Elodie, and like also like they've never touched me, you know. I feel like that has to be what it's from.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I like one of my theories too is that it will somehow inevitably lead to her death, just not necessarily through infection. I don't know. I was, I guess, anticipating that it's going to become a bigger plot point, like we're kind of predicting here, and that whatever it is going to like, they're going to be like, oh, like you have to die, or like something's going to happen for it. That's going to be like, there's going to be, if the title is truly about Jane Lawrence dying, which I guess is what I'm predicting here, then I think that the scalpel cut's going to have like the direct line to her death.
Right. It's kind of similar to like Bly Manor. I don't know if you ever watched that.
Mm-mm.
It's basically like a sacrifice needs to happen at the end, and it kind of ends up cleansing the house. So I could see that. It's kind of shitty that Jane would have to be the one to do that.
Well, but that does lead me to my next theory, which is that this is maybe too ridiculous, but I was thinking that maybe Jane is just undergoing a long process of sacrifice by Lawrence and his friends, and that this is all just kind of a setup. And like maybe that they'll intentionally sacrifice Jane in an attempt to bring Elodie back.
Which would be crazy. It is weird, though, some things in this book. The fact that Jane and Lawrence went to the same town for school, to differing levels of school, but they went to the next town closer to Lindridge, which is like Sharpton or something, I don't remember. But presumably, they were near each other.
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence has also been to Camhurst to study there, and that's where Jane is from. Like, they have crossover. Is that just like a fun coincidence, or yeah, could it be something?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason why that came to be for me was just like because I was so jarred by like the sudden arrival of the friends, and like I don't know, just kind of the weirdnesses in the story. I was like, well, maybe it's just because it's like they threw this all together, and so like it doesn't make a lot of sense because they need to go through all these motions that we don't maybe know about yet in order to like sacrifice Jane. So I don't know. It's definitely my most stretch one, but
yeah, I mean, Lawrence is capable of gaslighting, as we've seen.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I do think the doctor showing up, in my head, it really just felt like a way to deliver information.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they were done, they left.
If this book ends with the doctor showed up because they were involved with the long sacrifice of Jane, I might feel a little bit better about it because that would be wild.
It would make everybody else that much more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I could definitely get behind something like that. It's definitely unlikely as hell.
Yeah, I just don't think that's going to happen. But I mean, I also was like, the end of the last book wasn't going to happen, and it totally did. So
we've had crazier theories.
I'm trying to branch out a little bit. I play it too safe with too many of my theories. So
yeah, honestly, this one, I don't have much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be the most cliche book we've ever read.
I think you're kind of right on the cliche stuff because it immediately, like, I didn't think we were reading a romance, but it didn't take me long to think that, you know, like I didn't have to get super far in the book to be like, oh, I actually think this might be a romance.
Right. I thought the interesting thing was going to be that they aren't romantically involved, and now Jane has to put up with all of this bullshit.
Right.
But no, that's not the case.
And with that too, my assumption is that whether or not Lawrence dies or whether or not Jane dies, like they're totally gonna like be together, right? Like even if it's like she has to die, even if she gets sacrificed, it's gonna be like, but I love you. Like I don't think there's a version of this book that ends with them doing like the logical thing and like reverting to the marriage that they agreed upon, or divorcing, or like ending up separated somehow. Like I just think this is a romance. Like I think they are gonna justify them being together.
Yeah, unless like I think you mentioned, right, the death of Jane Lawrence could be the death of Jane Lawrence.
Yeah, like the death of them being married.
Yeah, if she does get into magic, maybe she does decide to leave.
Maybe she actually gained some independence. The independence she claimed she had at the beginning.
Because she's so obsessed with dividing by zero, isn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Like, she goes on about it 50 million times. And if that's basically how magic works in this universe, maybe she'll just become a magician. And that'll be like her obsession.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I guess the only other thing is Lawrence's character. At this point, he's very much like not wanting to do anything. He thinks he has to suffer for what he's done, blah, 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 you know.
It's being a sad boy. Mm-hmm.
Sad boy for sure. But I think he will have to get involved, either because he thinks it's the right thing to do, not very likely, or because he wants to help Jane and he has to save her, so he has to involve himself again, which I think is the most likely because it's forcing his hand. He doesn't actually choose.
Right.
But yeah, I think he will not be able to stay as distant as he is right now. But that's like a pretty easy assumption to make, I think.
Yeah. I have nothing to add.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to add either. We'll see. Maybe we'll be surprised.
Yeah, I'm open
that would
to
be
it.
fun. If you have your own thoughts and theories, obviously the Twitter is 5050_books. Also, I'm going to try and post more there just as I'm reading through. I'm still keeping it vague because I don't want to give things away for people who are just looking at the Twitter for some reason and haven't read the books yet or whatever. So I think I'll keep that up as long as I don't forget. And then we'll finish up this book next time, have a great discussion. Maybe it'll surprise us and it'll actually be crazy good at the second half.
I'm hoping so. I'm cheering. I'm rooting for this book.
Other than that, though, that's that. That's the conversation. Unhinged, a little all over the place. Sorry, but hopefully it was fun. I feel like I had a good time.
I had a
talking
great
about
time.
it.
Yes, I had a great time. All right, till next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.